Good evening, everyone. It's 7:31, so we need to start. Just to do a little bit of a summary of what we saw last week. It's on YouTube, but for those who didn't have the chance to look, or if you would like to see it as a whole, because really tonight is part 2, and next week we'll talk about another component of this class, and we'll talk about how you deal with parents with dementia or Alzheimer and other mental issues or physical issues that it's become very, very hard to respect them and to honor them. So that's what we'll do next week. So just to sum up a little bit of what we saw last time, we basically saw the fundamental question was Michel Av or Michel Ben, which means we know that we need to respect our parents and we need to honor them. The Talmud in Kiddushin talks about the fact that it's comprised with 2 components. One component is reverence, that you don't sit in the seat that belongs to your parents, you need to stand when they come in, right, all the good stuff. And then, but that doesn't cost money. What does cost money is that you need to provide for them food and drink and to clothe them if they need and to put them in a place if they need. And the Gemara and the Talmud ask, where are those funds comes from? From the children or from the parents? And we basically, what we discovered last week was that it's obviously, it's a dispute. But even according to the opinion that says that it comes from the parents, if the parents do not have it, the children should supplement. Now, the children will become obligated, but the Talmud discussed the question of what is the origin for their obligation? Is that tzedakah, like charity, like to any other one, or it's really still from the obligation to respect your parents? Then we saw that when we say that the obligation is on the children, there's also a question. What's happened if one of the children is very wealthy and the others are not? What's happened if the children don't have money either? And also what's happened later on, we also have a discussion, we should have a discussion, what's happened if the parents are just spending like there is no tomorrow and telling their kids, it's going to be your problem, not ours. And really, joking aside, we know that basically the longevity of life, Baruch Hashem, is tremendous. If our great-grandparents will know for how long we live, it probably will be, wow, how can you do that? However, it obviously involved with a lot of funds that we sometimes don't have. And by the way, I don't even discuss in these 2 classes the question of sustaining longevity of life versus investing that money in cancer and providing, drugs and medication to young people. And what do you do? And this is what I will call triage in funds. But this is really another class that we're not going to deal with it tonight, but it's also something that it belongs here. Now, what we basically saw also last week, that it seems to be that the halacha corresponds with what? That really the responsibility lies on whom? On the parents. And if the parents don't have it, that goes to what? To the children. Now, so let's see. I know most of the sources are in Hebrew. I think all of them in this class. So I will read and translate and try to be as close as I can and as accurate as I can to the translation itself. So the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, 14th century, says, that's on page 7, או לרבנן לרבי ירמיה, כמאן דאמר מישל אב, וכן הלכתה. So Rabbeinu Asher, 14th century, basically follows the line of halachic authorities that says that the responsibility to fund your own honor is on you, on me, which means on the parents. The parents need to make sure that they have sufficient funds to support themselves for whatever years they have. Then he says, it really comes from that if the father does not have it, if the parents do not have it, kaifinan leleben v'shaklinan mineh betorat tzedakah. He says that if the parents don't have it, and the parents need to be supported, you force the children to support their parents. Now, I know for those who were not here last week, it's like, you force the children to pay for their parents? I mean, like everyone does it, right? Or everyone who still have some money try to help his parents. The answer is, and I think I shared it with you last week, we have one of the takanot of Usha, one of the decrees that were made in Usha by the Jewish High Court was for the parents that they must sustain their children at least until they are 6 years old. Which means what? That the parents basically abandon their children even prior to the age of 6. Why? There was no food. There was no money at home. So if you basically fast forward, when children need to support their parents, they couldn't support their children, so now you want to tell me that I need to support my parents? Answer is, according to the halacha, even though we say that it needs to come from their parents' money, from the parents' funds, if the parents do not have it, it goes on the child. If the child does not want to give money to his parents, the Beit Din, the Jewish court, will what? Will force him or her to support their parents. Now, the Rosh also say that if the child does not have a lot of money, he needs to give whatever he has to support his parents, and if he needs to go and collect money from door to door for himself, that's what he should do. So you see what's happened? Meaning you need to support your parents if you have a little money. You need to give whatever money you have to support your parents, and for your own needs, what do you need to do? To beg. And why? Because if kibud horim, respecting your parents, is not just charity, so you need to give your own personal funds for it. Now for yourself, what do you need to do in order to support yourself if you don't have time to work because you support your parents? What do you need to do? To beg. That's what the Rosh says. Agaot Ashiri says also something interesting. One of the questions that we raised. And it says like that. At the same page, it's on the right column where there are really little letters, okay? When you really cannot read. Shlosha achin, 3 brothers. האחד עני שאין לו רק מה שמשתכר בלימודו. One is really poor, and he just has a little bit of a stipend from what he receives because of his teaching probably or learning. ולשני יש ט"ז זקוקין. He also does not have so much money. והשלישי עשיר ואינו כאן. And the third guy is wealthy, but he is gone. He is gone. That's many times what happens, right? You have 3 brothers, 2 are very poor, the one made it, so what does he do? See you later, right? So he's gone. ויש להם אם זקנה ענייה. They have a mother who is poor, old, וטובעת מעין פרנסה. She demands them to support her. קיימלן משל אב. He says, but really the halacha is that you need to tell your mom what? Sorry, sorry that your husband didn't take care of you, and I'm sorry that you didn't take care of yourself, but, we're not going to support you. But then he says, אלא דרב אילפס כתב, ידלת לאב ויש לבן כופין בתורת צדקה. He says, but because the Rif, Rabbeinu Yitzchak Elfasi, from the 10th century, and later on the Rambam and the Maimonides, and then the Rosh, and all the others says, that if the parents don't have sufficient funds, who are we after? After the children. And therefore, the wealthy child needs to give his share. But he needs to do it as part of charity. Now, this is a hard thing to say. It's not a simple thing to say. That basically, the children will support their kids, the children will support their parents if the parents do not have the funds, and the wealthy brother or the wealthy son will be responsible for that, because if the other 2 do not have it, and it will be only from tzedakah. Now, this is something very interesting. In this case, because today we'll be very practical, in this case you have 1 wealthy, and the 2 are what? Are poor. What's happened if 3 of them are wealthy? What do you think will be the answer? Divide it, right? You divide it by 3. Okay, good. Now I want to ask you a question. 3 of them have the same wealth. However, one has 10 children, one has 15 children, and one has 1 child. What do you think we do? So you can say you divide it by 26, right? 10, 15, and 1, right? That's what we said, right? 26 based on the children. Or you say they have nothing to do with each other. We look at the wealth of the children. And we don't care how many children they have. You want another one, a juicy one, okay? One was married to 5 wives, okay? So, and one was married only once, and one is not married. Okay, so there can be so many scenarios when it comes to the children. And by the way, as parents, we need to be smart to anticipate how do we not only live the world and not letting our children, fighting, but how we live our lives. And we try the children not to have too much of an animosity and tension regarding how they support their parents. I know it can be a very sensitive issue. I had my own share trying to help few, that it's very sensitive. Yes?
So what I'm trying to understand is if you pay for your parents, it doesn't count as tzedakah.
It does.
Every time.
According to one opinion, which means, you know what? Let me give a little bit of an introduction. I'm jumping the gun a little bit, okay? Let's just think about, you know what? Let's digress.
What I'm thinking is that some people really hold that you give 10% of your income. So does it get to count against that?
Okay, very good. Take this, put it aside. Let's think, okay? No Hebrew, only English today. When I say that I need to respect my parents and I need to fund them if they don't have sufficient funds. So according to everyone, you need to support your parents. Let's talk about the origin of it. Is the origin to support my parents now when they don't have it comes from tzedakah, which means charity, and all the laws of charity applies. So for example, is there any obligation on earth that if a poor person comes to me and say, can you give me $10? And I don't have $10, should I go and beg for $10 and give it to him? Doesn't make any sense, right? If I need to do it, so I'll be poor like him. So basically, if we say it's only the laws of charity, so back then, basically, if that's the notion, I don't need to go and beg for money. And also, I can treat the parents as what? As a charity case. I'm sorry about the harsh language, but a charity case. And as a charity case, I will go to the laws of charity. And the laws of charity says that the closest family member should receive my tzedakah before anyone else. And it makes sense, right? Why would you put your family on someone else and you will be the big macher helping someone else, right? It doesn't make any sense. You support first and foremost your family members. Make sense? Makes sense. But that's only one side of the formula. There is a second side. There is another opinion that says, If the parents do not have sufficient funds, the children become obligated to support their parents, but not as a charity case, but because of the concept of kavod, which means what? Respect and honor your parents. Basically, it's not the laws of tzedakah. It's the laws of kibud. And the laws of kibud says what? You need to support your parents. I'm not talking about, lavish things and other things, even though that it may be. But you need to at least support them for the what? For their basic needs. Now, what is basic needs? Very good. We discussed it a little bit last week, that it's very fluid. It's very hard to define because it's very subjective. By the way, I will just add one more thing that it's also very important. When we say the laws of tzedakah, laws of charity, even in the laws of charity, there is something very interesting. If someone very, very poor, very, very rich, lost all his wealth and he became poor, according to the Talmud, you need to support him to the same level that he used to live his life. Oh my, that's true. Now, when you think about it, if your parents let's say they were multi-billionaires, the problem is that they invested with someone that, why not? Let's bring him, why not, okay? And they lost all their money, everything. everything. You need to support them. Now, that means that you need to support them in the level that they used to have before. We all want it. Can we afford it? So here is, and I hope I'm answering the question, here is where is the problem. So that's what the Rosh says, and that's what the Agaot Ashiri says as a commentary on the Rosh. Now, when we continue on, you can turn to page 8. The Tur, Rabbi Yaakov Baal HaTurim, also says that it's really the responsibility to support the parents lies on whom? On the parents. They need to create enough sufficient funds. And by the way, let me digress for a second again, because I said that tonight will be more practical and less theoretical what we did last week. What are sufficient funds? No one knows when he or she will die, right? The funds needed in today's world to support ourselves are what? Tremendous. And you know what? I don't think we have enough time in our lives to save for everyone. For our children, for their tuition, and then for college, and for weddings, and for everything, and then for the parents. And the parents themselves just don't have enough time in their lifetime. So it's hard. It's as hard as it is to try to define what does it mean sufficient, what does it mean to have basic needs, it's very hard to define what are sufficient funds. So what we can do probably is to look at what is now and probably add to it at least 10 to 20% for the future. That's probably what it is. Now, we cannot predict it, but you're talking about tremendous amounts of money. So in a way, parents can always save and save and save, but it may be not sufficient. Now, the Bet Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, that's on the left side, says that he would like to claim that according to the Ramah that is being brought here by the Tur, he wants to say the following. You know what? Let me bring it again as a practical case, because it's all Hebrew. I don't like to do that. I want everyone to be involved in the text. It's not fair that I have an advantage on the Hebrew. When, let's do it like that. Am I obligated? I'm not saying if that's a nice thing to do or not, but am I obligated to not show up to work for 2 hours, to lose 2 hours of my day in order to visit sick people? I'm not the rabbi. That's not wasting. That's what I do. But you go and you are a professional. You are a lawyer, okay? You have a friend who is sick. Are you obligated to go and to leave your practice and to go and visit with him or her? No. It's nice if you will do it. I mean, it's incredible, but you don't need to lose money in order to create acts of kindness, right? Does that make sense? Makes sense, sure. After I finish my work, I can go and visit with him or her. Good. If I say that kibud horim, that respecting my parents, is exactly like any other act of kindness, basically, what do I say?
Like everybody else.
Very good. Do what?
Do it when it's convenient.
Exactly. You do it when it's convenient. Now, according to the Ramah, according to the explanation of Bet Yosef, that's probably what's the category for respecting the parents if they did not create enough sufficient funds for themselves. It goes to the children, but the children need to treat it like what? Any other act of kindness. However, the Bet Yosef is not happy with that opinion, and he says it's much more. And I will, you know what? I'll ask you the question. And this is a question, I think I brought it, it's really at the end. But it's an interesting question. Rabbi Binyamin Ze'ev, Rabbi Binyamin Ze'ev, not Herzl, okay? Rabbi Binyamin Ze'ev from the 16th century in Greece. He wrote a book by the name Shut Binyamin Ze'ev, Responsa of Binyamin Ze'ev. And he asked a very interesting question that maybe I should even open the class with that question. What's the bracha on kibud horim, on respecting your parents? There isn't. Did you ask yourself why we don't have it? Okay, so Mora Yehudit, you say it's a mitzvah, it's a commandment without any limits, without any time limits, right? Even after your parents die, you still need to respect them. You cannot honor them, meaning buying food and other things, but you need to mention them with awe, with reverence. And even when they are alive, you know, you never know when you start and when you really end. Okay, very good. One suggestion. Second suggestion, you know what he says? And that will go back to what we talked about before. He said, this is really not a unique mitzvah for Jews. It's not. We know that one of the most famous stories of people who were not Jewish, who respect their parents, is Dama ben Etina and Esav, Esau. Let's start with Esau. Esau did come from a family of Isaac and Rebekah, but the tradition tried to basically push him as far as they can. But Esau was an example for many Tanaim, many rabbis in the time of the Mishnah to say that they wish that they will respect their parents like Esau. You know what Esau did? Whenever he will come from the field, from hunting and everything, and he was bloody and all of that, before he will enter his father's tent, you know what he will do? Change his clothes.
So his father doesn't know that he's a...
And his father was blind. So the father did not even know that. Which means it's not only about how he perceives it, but it's really about what's my attitude towards my parents. And the Talmud, by the way, says it many times. Can be a person, a child, that feed his parents a steak every day, and he will go to the other direction of Gan Eden, okay? And then you have a person that can feed his parents barley, and he will go to Gan Eden. How can you explain that? Answer? Attitude. The first guy gave a steak to his parents and says, hey, take that, eat. Even if you give a steak, it's not considered that you respected your parents. But even if you gave your parent barley, but you said, Abba, Ima, father, mother, that's what I have, I'm so sorry, that's what I can give you, please eat and I'll help you, you fulfilled your commandment. So the Shut Binyamin Ze'ev, Rabbi Binyamin Ze'ev from Greece says, because really this mitzvah belongs to everyone, not only for Jews and non-Jews. And therefore we cannot recite the bracha. Why? Because what's a bracha? The bracha is Asher Kideshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, that God sanctified us from other nations and He gave us this commandment. He says, that's not true. Respecting our parents is not something that sanctified us. It's the same thing like other nations as well. So what makes respecting our parents Jewish? What will be the difference? What do you think? So why do we need it and it's a part of the 10 Commandments? What do you think?
But a lot of those laws or those rules are not, they're universal.
Mm.
Not to murder,
right.
So they're not Jewish.
That's true too, but let's go with the first one, because if you look, the first two were given to the Jewish people, but really basically giving in a universal way. And when you talk about Shabbat, it's only unique to Jews. Then you have respecting your parents, right? And we have long life, and we have all those beautiful things. But if there is really no difference between us and non-Jews, so why is it that it was part of the 10 Commandments? Why is it such an important mitzvah? I would like to suggest to you that the fact that we don't have a blessing does mean what he says, that it's really not unique to us. However, let's take a look for a second on the story of Dama ben Etina. The story of Dama ben Netina is mentioned in Gemara in Kiddushin, in Lamed Aleph, in 31. And it says the following story. There are some different versions for the story, but I'll just give you the short one because it's a little late. I know you will appreciate it. This guy had stones, beautiful stones, like diamond stones, that we need those diamond stones for what? For the breastplate, for the choshen. The Jewish people find out that one of those stones is missing. And they heard that this Dama ben Netina was a Gentile. He has those stones. So they went to him. They said, we would like to buy it. He says, I can't sell it to you. Sorry. We will give you, how much do you need? We are willing to pay you $1 million. You know what? We will double it, $2 million. He says, I can't, sorry. $4 million. I can't. $8 million. I'm sorry, I can't. The keys for the safe is underneath the pillow where my father lies down now. He is asleep. I'm not going to wake him up. Probably when the father woke up, wanted to kill him, right? But the story is not like that. Okay, the story is not like that. The father woke up, and Dama ben Netina says that's what it is. He called the sages and he says to them, I want to tell you, I'm going to sell you the stone for the first price. Not for the $8 million, but for whatever you offered me at the beginning.
The father called, not the son.
The son, not the father. Now, the thing is like that. Some people look at this story and says, wow, this is an amazing thing. And some people look at that story in a more critical eye, or maybe too much of a critical eye, and they say that what Dama ben Netina did, he didn't lose money. He just what? Basically forgave what? A tremendous profit. He knew, according to the critics, that the rabbis will come back for the stone because you couldn't find it anywhere. They will come back to him. He was very nice to give it for the what? For the first offer and not for the $8 million. However, he was not willing to what? To have a loss. He was not willing to lose money. He was just willing to what? Not to have a profit. Those are the criticals. The critics who read that story in a very critical eye, that I'm not sure, by the way, is justified. But what's the point? The point is, and this is where I think that goes back to our question. Even if I say that if the parents did not take care of themselves, the children needs to do it, and even if I say it's only from tzedakah, I think there is a divine expectation from us to do something more. I will tell you that according to many halachic authorities later on, like the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserlish and others, if someone uses his 10% to support his parents, it's not favorable. And why? Because you can't look at your parents as a charity case. It just, as we say in Yiddish, passt nicht. You know what is passt nicht? Passt nicht means it's a shame, it's tasteless. You don't do things like that. Those are the parents that gave you life. Those are the parents that brought you here. Those are the parents that gave you all those opportunities that now you have. And you know what? Even if according to the law, that's the only way you are obligated to do something, there is an expectation, and maybe this is why it's in the Ten Commandments, to tell you that God expects you to do more. Again, situations can be very complicated. Family dynamic, funds, here, there, and the other, it can be very complicated. But it seems to be that there is somewhat of more of an expectation. Now, let me share with you another interesting analysis. If you turn whatever page is, it's page 10. The Minchat Chinuch brings a very interesting analysis. He wanted to ask, is the commandment of Kibud Horim, the commandment to respect your parents, is that falls under Bein Adam LaMakom or Bein Adam LeChavero? Is that the commandment between me and God or between me and my fellow Jew? Let's think about it. Interesting. What will be the simplest way to define respecting your parents? Between man and fellow Jew, right? Here it's not even a fellow Jew, that's your parents, right? It's like I need to support my friend, obviously I need to support my parents. Very good. How can we see it as bein adam lamakom, between man and God? So, Moshe Shimshon says it's because of the partnership. You know, we were born because of our parents, but also because there was a third partner. Who was the third partner? God himself, who gave the soul, right? They gave the physical being or the physical formation, and God gave the soul. So he is a partner. By the way, also, if you look at the Ten Commandments, really respecting your parents is what? Is a transitional commandment between man and God and man and man. Because you have what? The combination of both. Now, also, as we saw, if you remember from last week, the Jerusalem Talmud, that they learned respecting your parents and the obligation, the monetary obligation from where? Because it says, kabed et Hashem me'oncha, respect Hashem from your wealth, and it says, kabed et avicha ve'et imecha, respect your father and your mother. Like when it comes to Hashem, you need to respect Him sometimes with your money. You need to buy tefillin, you need to buy mezuzah, you need to buy a sukkah, you need to buy tzitzit, you need to buy tefillin. The same thing you need to what? To do with when it comes to your parents. So it may be a commandment between you and God. What's the nafka mina? What's the ramification? So the Minchat Chinuch said something very interesting. He says, for example, on Yom Kippur. We know that on Yom Kippur, Hashem will not forgive you if you have a transgression between you and your fellow Jew and you did not ask for forgiveness. If you committed a sin between you and God, and you forgot to ask for forgiveness, God will forgive you on Yom Kippur. But if you committed a sin between you and a fellow Jew, and you did not ask for forgiveness, God will not forgive you until you go and ask for forgiveness. Now, this is something also very, very sensitive when it comes to parents. You know, sometimes we ask forgiveness from everyone, and we forget who? Your spouse, your siblings, your children, and your parents, right? Why is it? Very simple. It's harder. It's much harder. And I'm not sure about my opinion regarding text messages asking for forgiveness, okay? It's harder. What's happened on Yom Kippur? That's one nafka mina, one ramification. If you insulted your parents, and by the way, we didn't discuss yet, you know, we talked about the monetary issues, and we mentioned attitude. But sometimes, and we will talk a little bit more about that next week when parents has Alzheimer or dementia, when especially, and I will just give a little bit of an introduction, when the parent is in between, meaning not fully dimensioned, is that the word? Not. Demented. Demented, thank you. Like it's what I would call twilight. Some can be very mean, accusing their children in things that the children did not even dream to do. I'm talking about real life examples. I'm talking about parents who accuse their children they are stealing their money, they are taking over their lives, they want to kill them. Some parents even call the police over their children. Okay, you're talking about a variety of options. And sometimes, you know, you have a limit to how patient you can be, and you say something to your parents. And it's terrible. But, so if you didn't ask for forgiveness, or unfortunately there is no one to ask forgiveness from because he or she will not understand what you are even saying, or they don't even remember, what's happened on Yom Kippur? Do you need to ask for forgiveness or you don't? And if you didn't, is God going to forgive you or not? So what we see, and this is, I'm not dealing with that right now, what I want to take from the Minchat Chinuch is that, again, I can look at Kibud Horim as respecting your parents from different perspectives. And this is really the goal of this class, is to try to open it up to all aspects. I would like to suggest that really the two components applies on respecting your parents. In my opinion, and this is again the answer maybe to why is that in the 10 Commandments, I think that Kibud Horim, respecting the parents, has two components. One is between you and God. Because God is a partner, and God demands you to be like Him. And then, in addition to it, you have the component of what? Between you and a fellow Jew. So basically, Kibud Horim is not just a charity case. It's not just, oh, that's the best tzedakah that I can give. It's more than that. There is an aspect of kavod, of respect, of honor. And respect and honor to the parents is not only with the funds, but it's also with attitude, but it's also how you handle it. And by the way, I would just say one thing, and it's not to threat anyone, but our children observe everything we do to our parents.
But doesn't love have something to do with it? You talk about all these rules, but it's a love between parents and children. Doesn't this come into the equation?
You know what I said to someone? I'll tell you a little story, okay? I had a friend in yeshiva. We already got married, and I had a friend in yeshiva. And he wanted to get married. And he decided he is not going to go to work, he's not going to go anywhere, he's going to sit and learn. And he will have the stipend from the yeshiva. The stipend from the yeshiva was 1,000 shekels. $300, I don't know what it is, $280, not for a week, for a month. And he will be able to go and get married, this guy. And I said to him, he was very friendly with me. And I told him, I said, that sounds wonderful. Would you like to come with me somewhere? He says, yeah, sure. So we went to the little makolet, the little grocery store. And I said, would you mind to buy with me a few things? He says, sure. So we went to the register, and it was almost 100 shekels. So I said, if we make the calculations, in 10 days, you're going to starve to death, right? And I told him, love you cannot go with love to the grocery store. You will get a lot of sympathy, and you will get a lot of smiles, but you're not going to get your groceries. Which means what? You are 100% correct. The heart screams to all those laws. What do you mean? I'm obligated if my parents... That's like natural thing. If my parents don't have it, I'm going to support them. And even if they have it, I'm trying to help them. This is all good and beautiful if you have it. If you don't have the funds, that's when the tension comes. And I don't want to play a psychologist right now, but I can play it for just a second, so I'm becoming a psychologist for a second. Rabbi, I just cannot provide to my parents what I want, and it kills me. There is so much guilt. And Rabbi, I went to a restaurant and I spent $50 and I spent $100, and instead should I give it to my parents, and I couldn't afford 24/7, I could afford only 26, and now my parents are alone. Do you want more guilt? I'm a Jewish mother. I can give you guilt. Basically, the psychology and the family dynamic that comes out of it. Or later on, when you have siblings, 2 of them are in Memphis, 2 of them are in Atlanta, and 1 is in Los Angeles, okay? And then you start trying to coordinate all of them. And, after a while, don't forget, you also have spouses. And after a while, the question is, why are you doing everything? Let your brother do that. Let your sister do that. They have money. No, they have money. It can become what? So love is true. And love will probably motivate a lot of it. But the halakha try to focus on facts. And what is an obligation and what is not. Now, if someone says, I don't care if my parents have money, I have enough money to support myself, my children, my grandchildren, and my parents, and that's what I want to do, God should bless him and he will have more. But there is no obligation. Now also, and there is the flip side. I'll give you a question. Someone supports his parents. And he supports his parents even though his parents have money. Or he supports his parents even though they don't have money. but he supports them to an incredible level, like really lavish level. And a poor person comes to him and knocks on his door and says, can you give me a donation? Can that person says to him, I'm not giving you a donation, all my money goes to my parents. So, if you say based on love, the answer will be, tough luck to this poor guy. He went to the wrong door. He should go to his neighbor, right? He has the right to give all his money in order to sustain his family, his parents, to the level that they were used to have. But if we talk about laws, he's not doing the correct thing. He should give tzedakah to poor people and still support his parents, but not to a lavish level that they were not used to, or even if they were used to, but if they can get used to something that it's, I'm not talking about basic, I'm talking about something that it's comfortable for them, he shouldn't put all his money in only in one place. So there are many, many, many issues. Now, let's turn the page, please, to page 11. And I will ask you the following question. And the Aruch HaShulchan talks about it. What's happened? And that's also happened. The parents are multimillionaires. Tremendous amounts of funds. They get sick. They call their children and they say, my dear children, you're going to support us. We are cheap. Or, alternatively, let's do something that is more practical. The parent says, you know what, you convinced me. You know, I do need someone here at the house, but just for 2 hours a day. And you as a child, you talk to the doctors. And the doctors told you, your parents need 24/7. They can't have 2 hours. They will fall, they will have a stroke, they will whatever. And you go to your parents and you say, dear parents, you know, you heard what the doctor doesn't know anything. This is my money. I'm not wasting it on someone to just sit here and watch TV for, 8 hours shift. By the way, as I told you last week, I made the research. 24/7 nursing, 3 shifts a day can cost you $1 million a year. So, you make the math. So the parent says, I don't want it. And he has the money. He's just cheap. Okay? That's the way, by the way, to make money, right? He is cheap. He does not want to spend the money on it. He says, I don't need it. And you say, no, you need it. Is that become an obligation on you to take care of the rest of the hours that you think, and the doctors think, that your parents needs to have this nurse? Answer? It seems to be the answer is yes. But Aruch HaShulchan says that after the father passes away, or even while the father is alive, the child can sue his parents for a refund. Now, this is an interesting thing. Now, why am I saying that? And it sounds so like, what? You're going to sue your parents for that? Well, what are you? What's going on with you? Answer is, again, there is a law, and there is an obligation, but it's also fluid. And what do I mean fluid? It means that sometimes, and I see it, and I see it again and again and again. I'll give you another example. For many elderly people, the decision to leave their home and to go to an assisted living is a tremendous decision. The children are pushing, and I have it really recently, the children are pushing the parent, leave the house for your own sake. You already failed 7 times in the last 3 days. Why would you want to do that? You don't need that big house. There is no one there, it's scary. No one is there to see you. Come closer to us, come here to an assistant living. And some of the assistant living, by the way, in the neighborhood are like Gan Eden. Okay, they are like the Garden of Eden, they're wonderful. So why do you want to stay in your house like that? And the children try to push and push and push, but the children don't understand what? The there is a tremendous challenge. For what perspective? Perspective number one is what? This is a familiar place for the elderly person. He carries the memories. Every corner, especially if one of them lost a spouse, every corner, every place in the house brings memories. They feel that they will betray their spouse who died if they will leave the house. A. B. A house is your possessions. You still remember the first mortgage you took on it and how much time it took you to pay for it and everything that you built in the house. You don't want, it's not a toy. It's not an iPhone, you know, that you get an upgrade. It's a 50-year house, 40-year house, 30-year house. I mean, for most of the elderly people, we're talking about 30 plus years in the same house. It's hard, it's difficult. And they may understand what the child says. They may even agree that they need to move, but it is very difficult. And also, many parents, you know, believe and they hope that, you know, they will die in the house and then they can give the house to whom? To the children. But if you go to an assisted living or any other Jewish home, not the Jewish home here, any type of Jewish home, what do you need to do?
Sell the house.
You probably need to sell the house. It's difficult. So we sometimes, so why am I bringing this example? Because what's happened is that sometimes we cannot really expect the parents to do what is maybe even right for them and ask them to pay for something that is just and right, but they are not ready. So that's where love, law, commitment, obligation, guilt, respect, honor, everything what? Comes together. I'm sorry that I cannot give you simple answers. Every case is so sensitive and it's so loaded with so much. And also, sometimes the children, and sometimes we forget that part. The children says, look, I'm going to support my parents. But then something happened to the children. They lose money. They got into a bad deal. They miscalculated of how much money they need for their children. Whatever it is. And then the child says, oh my goodness, what did I do? And then what? Here is where you want to add to the complexity? I'll give you one. Why not? It's only 8:17, so I don't want you to go to sleep like that, like lightheaded, everything is great. What's happened? If God forbid, one of the children gets sick, or his child gets sick, what does he do with the money? Where to put it? To his parents? To his child? So all those questions, again, as I said before, are very individual cases, and they need to be solved as such. There is no formula. However, what the halakha tried to do is to create some kind of a framework. It's really on the parents. And if the parents cannot sustain themselves, it goes on whom? On the children. Then there is a dispute. On the children, what does it mean? Is that originated from tzedakah, just the charity, laws of charity, or laws of kibud? And even in these two, we have a variety of options of how am I making you obligated to support your parents. Now, just to end with one more halakha, is when we talk about basic needs for a parent, probably the safest way to determine it is by creating an evaluation of professionals. You can have a medical professional to give you an estimation of what the parent needs. You can have an estimation from a social worker of what he thinks or she thinks the parent needs. And based on that, you create some kind of a basic needs based on what they were used to and what is the level of lifestyle that they need to in order to create a comfortable situation for them. So, to summarize, the first two classes, last week and this week. The halakha, putting aside all feelings and emotions that are correct and makes the situation even more complicated, especially when funds are not there not for the children and not for the parents, and especially when the children don't have it, is that according to the halacha, it's really on whom? On the parents. The parents need to take care of themselves. If they don't have the money, it goes on whom? On the children. The children become obligated. Now the children become obligated according to many halachot, many poskim, many halachic authorities. They need to give it as part of their charity. Now what does it mean? Can they use maaser, the tithe, the 10%? According to some, yes. According to many, no. It's a horrible thing. Don't treat your parents as a charity case. They are not a charity case. You need to treat them as a respect case, not a charity case. And therefore, you are obligated to take care of their at least basic needs, not even more. How do you determine basic needs? Probably evaluation of professionals that help you to determine what does it mean basic needs. Later on, when you have different siblings, one of them is wealthier, one of them is little, is not as wealthy as the other. The wealthiest person needs to support the most. However, if everyone has money, they need to somehow divide it in a fair way that they all will support their parents. By the way, there are some solutions of when the wealthy siblings say to his siblings, look, yeah, God blessed me, I'm very wealthy, but I worked hard for it. And you know what? I am willing to support our parents, but after they die, I want what? A larger share in the inheritance. This is also doable. You need to restructure your will, but it is doable. It's almost like a loan in a way. And it's done. Many people do that. For example, if they need to sell a house and someone does not need the money yet, they put the money aside, or they will say that after 120 for the parents, he will get more in the apartment or in the house or in the whatever possessions they have. So what the halakha try to do is to give some kind of a framework that we can work with, however, to still leave flexibility for what? Different cases. And to also understand that with all the love and the compassion and the graciousness and the gratefulness that we have to our parents, we also have responsibility to whom? To our own children and to ourselves. And especially, and I will conclude right now, especially with longevity of life, it's not only for our parents, it's also for what? For ourselves. So now we have responsibility to our children to save enough funds for ourselves. So as I said, I think last week, it's expensive to live, it's expensive to die. But we are here because God put us here, and we can overcome those challenges. We just need to be very smart of how we do that. We need to understand that there is law, there is halakha that try to guide us into the right directions. However, leaves it flexible enough to try to give the halachic authorities, the rabbis, the judges, the understanding and the flexibility to try to help people to do what they are expected to do as part of Bein Adam Lamakom, between the man and God, and also between Bein Adam Lechavero. Kent or Kempf?
All these halakhas, are they the same for in-laws?
Woo! That probably was the most juicy question here, right? The in-laws, you would like to consider them as outlaws, I guess, for this halakha. But the in-laws is really, Moshe Shimshon, I think, mentioned that in the last week's class, regarding there are some rules and halachot that changed a little bit with the time, but the original law was, for example, that a wife can respect her parents as much as her husband lets her. It's a very complicated halakha. Thank you, Kent Kemp, for bringing it in the last 2 minutes, so I can really do justice to the subject, right? But today, because of equality and many things, I don't think any husband tried to prevent his wife from doing what is right, and any wife will prevent her husband to do what is right. However, again, love can blind people. And because of love, you would like to give and give and give, and sometimes one of the spouse will tell you, whoa, I understand it and I love it and it's wonderful and I'm willing, you know, to forgive you that you didn't buy me anything for my birthday for the last 25 years, but I don't like your parents so much. Okay? So we do have that. And that's complicated. Because the last thing that the parents want is what? That his children will get divorced. Because his child needs to respect him. So it's complicated. Yes?
Rabbi, how does the halacha take into account strained relationships, or I don't know if you have time to address that, or you plan to, or you did last week, or let's say if there's been, you know, abuse or some horrible.
Yeah, this is
I mean, the love is wonderful.
Right.
And unfortunately, there are families who have the
other side.
The other side.
Yeah, the other side of love. So, so basically, it's a great question. I will just answer it doing zero justice to the subject matter. There is a question of how much do I need to respect an abused parent while he is alive, and how much do I need to respect him after he or she dies. There are two different questions. It seems to be, according to many, that the same laws will apply, again with the sensitivity to the circumstances. Which means, if the parent was so abusive that ruined your life, maybe the law, the expectation will still be there, but I think there will be a lot of understanding to why you can't. But it is very complicated, many different sources, and because of the time now, not the time on the clock, but the times change, and we know and we understand more of the psychological effect of an abusive parents to the children and to the way they build families, there is now much more tolerance to understanding of children that just can't do it.
tolerance halachically?
Even halachically, yeah. Yes?
I thought you were going to deal with honoring your parents' wishes as far as do not resuscitate and extending life. I didn't know it was going to be about financial.
Oh, okay.
That's a whole different class, though.
Financial will be the easy part.
Right.
Yeah, your question is, again, a very, very good question. And you know what? But if this is really some issues that you are interested, I'll be glad to give more classes about it. The original plan was to give just 3 classes just about the financial support, because that was a very hot topic and still very hot topic. I deal with that. I don't want to say daily because it's an exaggeration, but very frequent when situations like that comes up. And the third one will be something very, very common with dementia and Alzheimer that I will deal next week. But what you are asking in terms of respecting my parents' wishes, and in writing or in spirit, because some parents do not want to discuss it or don't want to write it, but you know that that's not what they wanted for their lives. And then is that respecting them, and then you put on the scale, but there is the importance of life and prolonging life, but you prolonging death or you prolonging life. So we can deal with all those questions, Bezrat Hashem, maybe in just a different class. David.
Just a little bit on that subject. They want to change that from DNR to AND, allow a natural death. Because the reality of the question is, when your loved one dies, do you want us to try to bring them back? And one of the reasons they want to change that is because the way they say it now, it puts the onus on the family. And everything is hand to God. You know, when their time comes and God wants to take them home, that's what happens. So they want to change that whole scenario to say, let's look at the whole big picture. That's why discussion is important ahead of time. But something you said before about, you know, I've got a 95-year-old mother who I swear God has put on this earth just to harass her son. And she lives in Cincinnati, and I have to respect her. She's still together, so I have to respect her wish to be up there as much as I don't want it. But my take on it is that when you talk about Alzheimer's and dementias, that's a disease process that's going on. If that happens, that's no longer my mother. So that's why it's so important to have a talk, and she and I have. I know exactly what she wants. But dementias and Alzheimer's, you don't ever have to get into an argument with them as long as you understand the disease.
All right, so that we will discuss a little bit more next week. Yeah, we will really discuss what does it mean and how we deal with it. But again, you know, I understand the discussion regarding how you try to take the burden from the children and really put it in a nicer, more politically correct, diplomatic way. I understand the need for it. At the end of the day, it's the same question. So I don't want to just throw answers in the air without giving you the sources and without analyzing them. But basically, what we did the last 2 weeks was the financial aspect and some attitude aspect today. And next week, B'ezrat Hashem, 7:30 will be the last class in that series, talking about, I would say, we're not, Jason, we are done, right? Really a crazy story. We're going to have a crazy story about an elderly mother and from a Talmud. And then from there, we will go and discuss what are you obligated to do, and we will involve some research that we have. The what? No.
זרקה עליו נעליים.